Cinderella, History and Visual Analysis by Group 2. First, we will discuss the history of Cinderella. Here are the main authors that we will be using. First is Basile, who wrote The Cinderella Cat in 1634. Next is Charles Perrault, who wrote Cinderella in 1697. After, we will discuss d'Aulnoy, who wrote Finette Cindron in 1698. Next, we will discuss the Grimm brothers, who wrote Cinderella in 1857. Next, we will discuss Walt Disney, who animated Cinderella in 1950. His company later on created a live-action version of Cinderella in 2015. We will be visually analyzing this film. Let's begin by summarizing each of these variants, so we can understand their differences and their similarities. First, we will summarize Basile, Cinderella Cat from 1634. In this variant, Cinderella's name is Zozola. Zozola's mother dies, and her father remarries an awful woman who is mean to Zozola. Zozola bonds with her teacher, who treats her in a nurturing, motherly manner. Zozola kills her stepmother so that her teacher can marry her father. Zozola discovers that the teacher has 6 daughters, and Zozola's father forgets about her. Zozola's father goes away on a trip and talks to a fairy for Zozola. The fairy sends her back a date tree and the tools to grow it. Zozola plants the date tree and can ask it anything. She wants to go to a festival, so she asks the tree for help. She attends 3 nights, and the king tries to find where she lives but does not succeed. On the 4th night, Zozola drops a patent and a servant takes it back to the king. The king holds a party but cannot find who owns the patent, so he holds another one, asking everyone to bring all the women. Zozola's father tells the king that he has a daughter, but she is not worthy enough for him, and the king tells him that she is actually at the top of his list. Sure enough, the patent fits, and she becomes the queen. Next, we will summarize Perrault's Cinderella from 1697. This variant might sound familiar because this is what Walt Disney based his film on. In this variant, Cinderella's father is remarried to a wicked woman. With her comes 2 pompous and treacherous daughters, Cinderella's stepsisters. The father's love for his new wife is noticeably more than his love for his own daughter. When Cinderella is being tossed around and treated like a servant by her stepmother and her daughters, her father does nothing but tell Cinderella to just do the work. As the story proceeds, we learn that they are harsh to Cinderella because they are jealous of her looks and compassion. When they finally think that they have won by going to the ball and leaving Cinderella at home to do the dirty work, she is visited by her fairy godmother, who grants her 1 night, in beautiful clothing and a beautiful carriage, to go to the ball and meet the prince. When the prince falls in love with her, he hosts a 2nd ball, and when Cinderella leaves her slipper on the step to beat her family home, the prince uses the slipper to find her again. When he finally finds Cinderella, she successfully tries on the slipper and she becomes the queen. Next, we will summarize Finette Cindron by d'Aulnoy. This version was created in 1698. This variant is unique because Finette is independent and tough, but retains traditional feminine qualities. In this variant, a young princess named Finette and her sisters are led astray by their mother when they lose their kingdom. Finette finds her godmother, who gives her advice and heeds a warning. When she doesn't listen to the warning out of selflessness, Finette and her sisters end up lost by their mother's hands. When they finally believe that they found sanctuary, that reality is soon ripped away by a monster and her husband. On a fine line of fighting death, this young princess does whatever it takes to save her older sisters and herself. However, when all finally looks okay, her 2 sisters turn on her and she is left in the dust as they try to find husbands and treat their younger sister as a slave. Soon Finette discovers a secret that makes her the most beautiful girl in the kingdom, which brings forth marriage to the prince and reunites her with her mother and father again. Throughout all of the horrors, Finette remains polite and well-mannered. Now we will summarize the Grimm Cinderella, which was created in 1857. In this variant, Cinderella's father remarries a woman who forces her into servitude. Cinderella plants a twig on her late mother's grave and weeps there and prays there every day. The twig grows into a tree and a white bird starts to live there. The bird grants Cinderella's wishes and helps her with her chores. The bird also gives Cinderella her gown for the prince's festival. After the festival, the prince finds Cinderella's pure gold slipper and looks for her. Cinderella's stepsisters mutilate their feet in order to fit into the slipper in an attempt to trick the prince into marrying them. The prince was not fooled and asks to see Cinderella. The slipper fits her perfectly and she rides off with the prince. In the end, 2 white pigeons peck out the wicked stepsister's eyes. Now we will summarize Disney's Cinderella from 1950, the animated film. In this variant, Cinderella loses her mother and her father remarries so Cinderella could have a motherly figure growing up. However, when her new stepsisters and mother moves in and her father unexpectedly passes, her life takes a turn for the worse. She soon finds herself at the mercy of her stepmother and stepsisters. Moved to the attic and forced into servantry, she becomes a victim of emotional abuse. The king sends a decree to all the eligible fair maidens, stating that they are having a ball so the prince can meet his future wife. Before the ball, the stepsisters ruined their dresses and left Cinderella in rags when they were done. No one expected Fairy Godmother to come and give Cinderella the most beautiful dress and carriage the land had ever seen. After a night full of fun with the prince and the lost slipper, the family receives a post stating that the prince will be marrying the woman who fits the slipper. With Cinderella locked in the attic, how will they try on the slipper? With the help of some furry friends, Cinderella finally has her happy ending. Now we will summarize Disney Cinderella from 2015. This is the variant that we will be visually analyzing later on. This variant is similar to the previous Disney film, but there are a few differences. In this variant, the heroine's real name is Ella, and her wicked stepmother and stepsisters gave her the nickname Cinderella after forcing her into servitude. One day, Cinderella meets a man named Kit. Kit and Cinderella hit it off immediately. Cinderella is unaware that Kit is the prince. The king throws a ball to help Kit find a wife, but his heart is set on Cinderella. Cinderella's fairy godmother helps her attend the ball, and she and Kit spend time together. Cinderella's stepmother finds out that she attended the ball and destroys the glass slipper out of anger. The stepmother reports Cinderella's identity to the Grand Duke. Kit finds out about this and searches for her. He finally finds her and they are married. Now we will discuss the socio-historical elements present in these European and American variants of Cinderella. First, we will discuss how the European variants are restoration tales. A restoration tale occurs when a character's social status is regained. Restoration tales reflect the European value of aristocracy. This is evident in the way the audience is meant to view Cinderella. She is told that she is left by her stepmother and sisters, and in consequence is forced to work to survive. In 17th century Europe, the time period in which most of these variants were written, the wealth gap was tremendous between the royalty and those of the working class. Therefore, it was common for authors to feed into this expectation through their stories. As the story continues, we start to recognize how Cinderella's value is achieved after she gets closer to becoming part of the elite, first at the ball and then eventually in her marriage. In contrast to European Cinderella tales, American Cinderella tales have rags to riches narratives. The rags to riches narrative is one more often adopted by Americans because it reflects the American dream. Although Disney's Cinderella from both 1950 and 2015 are both based on Perrault's original story, the inclusion of songs and the blatant promotion of attitude over circumstance reflect this ideology. In the 1950 cartoon, Cinderella sings happily while she works, and although she is emotionally and physically abused, she never veers off the path of righteousness. By maintaining her virtues, she is able to secure a happy ending, especially compared to her sisters. In the 2015 version, her mother tells her to live courageously and kindly while on her deathbed. These ideas are also reflective of Protestant Christianity. This is where true value and success come after you follow the laws and expectations placed on you by your society. Cinderella is seen as a role model not because of her ability to overcome her circumstances, but rather by her ability to stay calm and obedient in moments of grief and turmoil. Next, we will discuss the socio-historical element of race. Many would consider the use of African American casting in Cinderella 2015 as a symbol of modernity and acceptance. But when we consider the period and location in which the original Cinderella stories were written, it's likely that this wasn't an uncommon practice. In the opening scene, we actually see African workers emptying the carriage of goods her father brings home. This doesn't challenge our historical view of Eurocentric superiority, but later on we see Black actors playing army captains and wealthy landowners. It is likely that a descendant of the African continent could have recognized some sort of authority had they been assimilated enough. The two main examples of this in the movie is the captain, and the other being a wealthy family whose daughter tries on the glass slipper. Let's compare this to d'Aulnoy's works. Her version of Cinderella has become quite prominent considering that many modern American fairy tales derive from their French origins, such as Perrault's. In one of her stories, the character of Prince Marcassine is an example of a non-white character being coded in fairy tales. Quote, despite Prince Marcassine's dress, education, and training in courtly manners, his animal nature continually prevents his complete assimilation into French culture, end quote. Ideas of race and culture clearly were on the forefront of many authors' minds during this time period, considering this was a period of transition in the development of race as a concept. Now we will discuss how the socio-historical elements of race and gender are related. The reason why I bring up race is because in this period of French culture, both women and racial others had the potential to be elevated to positions of authority, but were not given the chance to. I don't think that this was the intention of the director when creating the 2015 version, but is important to consider when reviewing the history. Many non white and female Europeans would try to establish legitimacy in the eyes of greater society, but oftentimes this was in vain. The all-new Cinderella story also utilizes the rise of the hero, but during the process allows her female protagonist to appear as strong and capable as she protects her sisters from death. Now that we have discussed the history of Cinderella, as well as the socio-historical elements present in the tale, we will visually analyze Cinderella 2015. We will be analyzing 3 images from this film. The first image is Cinderella as a servant. The next is Cinderella in her carriage arriving at the ball. Finally, we will analyze Cinderella in her ball gown walking down the steps at the ball. We will be using the following elements to analyze these frames. First is color, next is line, after is human body, then context, space, and argument. First, we will discuss this frame of Cinderella as a servant. Color. Cinderella's bright blue dress contrasts with the earth tones of the background. This makes Cinderella stand out. The color is similar to the color of the extravagant ball gown that she will be wearing later on. Her dress is worn down and dirty. This indicates her status as a working-class woman. Line. The strong horizontal line created by the wooden bar suggests strength and stability. This tells the viewer that Cinderella is very experienced with manual labor and can handle herself. Human body. Cinderella's strong stance suggests that she is confident in her ability to do manual labor. Her body may be under strain, but she is capable of overcoming it. Context. The setting for the scene is a farm. Cinderella's presence in the farm indicates that she is currently a working-class woman. Space. Cinderella is the only human in this scene. This reflects her isolation from her family and society. And finally, argument. Hard work and independence is valuable. Working can cause loneliness, but it also creates strength. Now we will analyze the frame of Cinderella arriving at the ball. Color. There are 2 main colors that take up the space here in this photo. Gold, which is showing up the most and normally expresses wealth and power. The intricate design on her carriage also represents wealth and power. Her blue dress draws the focus. There's a deep contrast between the dress and her background. Since everything is gold, you notice her as the odd one out. Line. This image has a vertical line aspect. This causes the viewer's attention to be drawn to Cinderella, who is in the dead center. Even though she is slightly hunched over, you can clearly see that the ratio of her and the wideness of the carriage makes her more elongated. This makes her the sole focus. Space. This image is 2-dimensional. Cinderella is taking up most of the space. Figuratively, she is this image. However, the carriage is taking up the space literally. Cinderella's presence brings forth a feeling of excitement and nervousness. Human body. As you examine Cinderella's body language, she is leaning towards the viewers and the castle. Her position shows that she is interested in where she is and who or what she is looking at. Her expression also shows that she is in awe of what she is seeing. Context. Here you can see that Cinderella is in her carriage and on the verge of stepping out. The viewer can see that she is wealthy and beautiful. However, the viewer truly knows that she is actually a woman of low status. And finally, argument. Don't let your fears or anyone tell you that you cannot do something or can't be something. Finally, we will analyze this frame of Cinderella on the steps. Color. All of the colors around Cinderella are dull and subdued, while her dress is vibrant and sparkly, creating a natural draw towards her. The brightness of her dress invokes a stark contrast between Cinderella and the outlining shades. Line. The stairs make excellent lines, drawing the viewer's eyes directly back to Cinderella. This assures that the viewers can't take their eyes off of her, just like the people in the scene. Space. Centered in the frame and centered on the stairs, Cinderella is the center of attention. The space in this picture perfectly hugs her, but it doesn't take away from her at this moment. Human body. In this scene, Cinderella has her head up high and her shoulders back. The viewer can feel her confidence exude from her. She looks already like royalty by her stance and elegant walk. Context. The lowly maid that no one pays attention to is now the center of attention. Hours before she was in rags and filth, and now she is in the castle looking like a high princess. This is one of those take your breath away moments. And finally, argument. No matter where you come from, you can end up on top. Never let your circumstances keep you down, because you never know what your future looks like. If you give up now, you may never make it to the ball. In conclusion, we learned that Cinderella has many variants. The European variants are restoration tales. The authors of these variants are Basile, Perrault, d'Aulnoy, and the Grimms. The American versions are Rags to Riches tale. And we looked at the Walt Disney films from 1950 and 2015. We also learned about the socio-historical elements of Cinderella tales, such as race and gender. Finally, we visually analyzed Cinderella 2015. We looked at color, line, human body, context, space, and argument. This allowed us to determine how this variant compares to the previous variants. Thank you for listening to our presentation. We hope that you learned a lot about Cinderella today.